All right, so let's get started. Just so everyone is clear, we are in the fourth breakout, which will cover the neighborhoods of Ivy Hill, Vailsburg, Upper Roseville, and Western Newark. Before we dive in, just quickly touching base back on the guidelines that we showed at the beginning of the meeting. We certainly encourage you, and I will as well, turn on my video if you are able and willing for the conversation today. We have a lot of stuff to share with you, but we'll be included at spots every few minutes for discussion, question and answer, and so that you can engage. And you're always welcome to engage through the chat as well. When you're not speaking, please do stay on mute. And of course, we want to make a space for everybody to participate. So please do, if you feel that you are contributing too much or the only one contributing, please do try to make space for all to participate. And of course, we will again have a conversation and time for question and answer after we present the material. So the goal of this breakout is to get your input on what we've been looking at in terms of solutions and recommendations for flooding. And we've broken these solutions into different scenarios. And to hear from you what we think is most important to advance, we'll begin by starting by reporting out on what we've heard from you, what's at risk of flooding in this area. And then we will ask you to help us understand vision and priorities to help guide the development of solutions that we'll talk about and continue to refine through the remainder of this project. So now for some area context. I'm sure all of you know the area as well, but we want to relay some of what we've heard from the community and from folks who live in these areas think are important, and make sure that if we're missing anything, you have an opportunity to let us know. So Upper Roseville, this is an area that's largely residential, has a more suburban feel than many other parts of Newark. And the residential areas consist mostly of single family and two family homes mixed with some apartments. The area has a strong sense of community. There are many local block associations. South Orange Avenue is the major commercial strip with many small businesses. And Ivy Hill Park and Vailsburg Park are two mid-sized parks in the area. You have to excuse my dog, if you can hear him in the background, that are heavily used. And one of the big things that we've heard through the engagement process is increasing access to neighborhood and pocket parks is important in this neighborhood. The Roseville and Upper Roseville areas are similar in feel to Ivy Hill and Vailsburg, but a little more densely populated. The neighborhoods at front of the beloved Branch Brook Park, a county park that is an important place to many people in Newark. And the Newark Light Rail runs along the west side of the park. Other themes that we've heard through the engagement, which include a desire for continued improvement to public transportation, improved pedestrian experiences, local grocery stores and food deserts, and community gardens and spaces for local businesses. So I'll pause there just very briefly. Is there anything that we've missed in sort of our understanding of these neighborhoods? If not, that's fine. All right, well then let's keep moving. So as you know, the primary focus of Resilient New Jersey is to develop solutions for reducing risk from and building resilience from flooding. Early in the project, we have asked you and your neighbors who have experienced flooding, or how you've experienced flooding, where you've experienced flooding, and how it's impacted you. We've used this feedback to ground the risk assessment that we're currently in the process of wrapping up. And the risk assessment that we've developed as part of this project uses new flood models to understand both current conditions from different levels of rainfall or rainstorms, and to predict what rainfall could look like in future years, in 2070, so about 50 years from now. The 2050 conditions take into account about a 10% increase in rainfall and a certain level of sea level rise, which will affect the ability of rainfall and our natural and man-made drainage systems to discharge that rainfall away from property, streets, infrastructure, and homes and businesses in the community. Although this area isn't near the coast, there is still a significant risk of flooding from rainfall, as you can see on these maps. And we've heard from residents who have had significant flooding in their homes and streets during the remnants of Hurricane Ida and the extreme rainfall that it resulted in September of last year. This rainfall is already or is expected to be severe in areas near Seton Hall University and in the lower Vailsburg neighborhood around 18th Avenue. The flood models also show significant flooding within Ivy Hill Park and Vailsburg Park as well. We've received quite a bit of video footage from residents that show the really extensive flooding that occurred during Ida, including flooding, that's entering homes and businesses and flooding cars and so forth. And so this is very real for many of you and your neighbors, and something that we very much want to talk about how this can be addressed coming out of this planning process. One of the things that we also heard is that a major issue in the neighborhood is that storm drain catch basins, where water enters from the street into the underground drainage network, become clogged with trash and other kind of debris. And that this is something that we've integrated into our planning process, and we'll talk about in a moment through the scenarios, different solutions or potential solutions for trying to alleviate that problem in both of these neighborhoods.
And Trevor, before we get too far, it looks like we do have a couple questions in the chat. And there's a question of whether we can return to the previous slide here.
Sure.
As well.
Is this the correct slide, Melissa? Great. Did you have a specific question or want to talk about anything here? Give a moment for Melissa to type something in the chat if she has a question.
And while we're waiting, I know Simi had a question here as well.
Yeah, Simi, can you talk more about what you mean by that?
I'm just trying to figure out, we're right here by Springfield Avenue. I was looking at your model. That's like the up Ivy Hill side, but what's on the other side of other side of 18th Avenue, like 18th Avenue, 16th Avenue side. I think it was somebody else who's in the chat was asking about that Clinton Hill section too. We're right there, like South Ward, 2nd District. The Clinton Hill section probably would be like the 3rd or 4th District of Newark, in that South Ward, but we don't see that coverage on the map.
I see. Yeah, it might be. I'm not familiar with those specific locations, but it might be in one of the other areas that's covered in a different breakout.
No, it's not.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Melissa.
I was actually looking for the South Ward and I couldn't find it, so I joined this district. But that's why I was asking if you could return to the previous slide. I knew it wouldn't be.
So let's go back to the this slide here. Where on this map is the map that's shown here, the area that you're talking about?
Well, it's not on here because this the South Ward is a completely different ward from the West Ward. Like this is the West Ward. This map is the map of the West Ward.
Okay.
Yeah, but like Upper Clinton Hills area, this is Delia Johnson, sorry. Upper Clinton Hills area would be like in this number 2 area right here. Like right top side of the airport and a little way in.
Yeah.
But I can't really see with the shading.
Yeah, so it might be that you're in that breakout 2 would cover some of those areas. This is, so the Passaic River is this line here. And we're looking at these, the areas covered in 4, the number 4 here.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, Melissa, did you have other questions, or do you want, shall we carry forward?
Oh no, that was it. I just wanted to view that map.
Okay, great. Yeah, and then just to cover the risk context for the Upper Roseville area, this this is similar in kind of character, the risk context, which shows significant rainfall flooding expected in the Branch Brook Park and area to its west, and some of the most significant flooding in the most western streets along the border with Bloomfield. The models do in fact match with what we've heard through the engagement process for flooding in the area of Davenport and along 10th, 11th, and 12th streets. I think this is something that we will continue to refine, and what we really want to hear is if there were impacts that were felt from Ida or other rainfall events that we should know about and that can be addressed through this program. I look forward to hearing about that in the breakouts as well, or in the conversation, I should say. So we're going to move now into the discussion of these scenarios. And I want to make sure we pause here and kind of explain what the scenarios are. So this is a diagram that kind of represents each of the three scenarios. And the scenarios, one way to think about them is to not think of them as alternatives, but to think of them as kind of constellations of different actions that we could take together, and who needs to manage or be responsible for each of those actions and at what scale. So whether at kind of the individual or municipal scale, to the kind of scale of partnerships or organizations and municipalities working together, all the way out to the regional scale. So scenario one, as I mentioned, is really all about individual initiatives. What can a municipality or a municipal agency do alone? Scenario two is about shared responsibility. What are the things that can only be done if we work together, if we collaborate across sectors and across organizations? Think about things like public-private partnerships. And then scenario three is all about regional responsibility, the kinds of actions that can only happen if we work together as part of a broader regional geography, municipalities and agencies working together to accomplish shared goals. These scenarios were all developed to accomplish the same goals. And the final preferred scenario, which will come out of the Resilient New Jersey project, will take elements of each of these scenarios towards development of an action plan. So really these are kinds of ways of organizing information and different actions that we can take in a way that helps explain how they can be implemented and at what scale. And all of the actions that we'll discuss are potentially going to be part of the action plan. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tyler, who's going to talk about, I should mention that our actions are broken into two categories, physical and non-physical. So Tyler is going to talk about physical strategies, and he'll explain what that means in a moment. And then I'll talk about non-physical strategies for each of the scenarios. Take it away, Tyler.
All right, thank you, Trevor, and hello again to everyone. Maybe before we dive in here, just to talk a little bit about how this is going to be set up for each of the scenarios. There's going to be 4 parts, essentially. We're going to talk through a little bit of the different types of strategies that we considered for each of the scenarios on looking at some of the pros and cons of them. Then we're going to show some maps about where we were able to kind of locate some of these strategies to put them kind of in a spatial context and show geographically where they're going to be. After that, we're going to look at some of the non-structural solutions that Trevor mentioned. And then the 4th section is going to be really to capture your feedback about what you do and don't like about the scenarios. So as we go through, if you could think of some of that feedback along the way for when we get to that last slide, that would be great. Okay, so let's dive in here to scenario 1. We're going to talk about drainage improvement strategies as a physical solution. And then the second slide is going to cover green infrastructure strategies. And so recall, I think, from scenario 1 that this scenario involves essentially entities acting individually with the authority that they have now. And so a major theme that you're going to see here is we're going to try to do strategies that involve work in the right-of-way or other public properties that are already governed by the municipality, things that the municipality can do without much coordination with other entities. And so when we look at that from the drainage improvement side, there's a couple elements here that we're looking to cite. First being ways to move water away from those at-risk areas that Trevor showed earlier on the call. And the second strategy is what we're calling urban stormwater retention parks, which is just opportunities to try to hold back water before it gets to the areas that flood. So moving water away when it gets to those flooded areas, and then trying to hold as much back as possible. On the green infrastructure portion of this, we're trying to limit the amount of impervious areas that are going to generate a lot of runoff. So we're looking at parking lots on public properties to see if we can change those from asphalt surfaces to something that has greened surfaces that will infiltrate that water. And then along the roadways themselves and the right-of-ways, trying to integrate green infrastructure practices like a bioswale that you see in the top right corner. Okay, so that's an overview of the strategies themselves. Now let's dive into some of the plans here that show where we may be able to cite some of this. So we're looking at the map, and let's start from the green infrastructure side now. You can see the light blue dots with the arrows next to them. Those reflect those stormwater park areas where we're trying to collect water and keep it away from those lower areas that are at risk. And so you see some opportunities here at the Ivy Hill School, at Lincoln School, Boylan Street Rec Center, and Vailsburg Park itself. Then you're going to see some of the light green lines along some of the roadways. Those are where it may be possible to do green infrastructure corridors, to put a lot of those green infrastructure practices along the roadways. And so here you see that along Route 510, Divine Street, and 18th Avenue. 18th Avenue being particularly important given some of the flood risks that we saw in that area on earlier slides. And then in the drainage improvements portion of this, there's a note there. It's a little hard to see the dashed green line at the bottom, but the idea here was to explore ways to send excess water in those high-risk areas into the Elizabeth River before they have a chance to kind of build up, accumulate, and cause damages. So that's a quick overview for Ivy Hill and the Vailsburg area. Now let's turn over to the Upper Roseville area and take a look at that map. So a few similarities here between the two. Again, we see the light blue dots for the stormwater park retention areas. Here, it looks like some of the opportunities are at the Ridge Street School, at the Newark School Stadium, and at Franklin Elementary. Again, you see the series of the light green lines showing some of the green corridors along Bloomfield Avenue and Park Avenue. And so that's where there are some similarities between the two. Now, there's also a couple of additional opportunities here. You can see the dashed light blue lines are areas where we think we can try to create new stormwater sewers that collect that runoff, and rather than put it into the existing sewer system, try to take advantage of some of the public property green spaces at the Branch Brook Park and Branch Brook Lake. So those sewers would move water into those green spaces to hold it there and to convey it away from those areas on the west side of the park. And if you recall from Trevor's earlier map, those areas where the light blue lines are were at the highest risk of flooding. So being able to move water away from there quickly is important. And then you see the orange bounded area, and that is protection for public housing, which would include flood proofing and hardening of buildings that may be particularly at risk if they're in low-lying or depressed areas, like natural bowls where water can't get out of. So I'll turn it back to Trevor to take a look here at the non-physical solutions.
All right, thanks, Tyler. And just a note for those looking for other areas of the city not represented in this or other breakouts, just want to note that particularly these non-physical solutions, which are solutions that are more related to outreach education, policy and governance, new services, and emergency management, really do apply citywide. So even if your area isn't shown on the map, we would be looking at these types of solutions and these types of approaches as they apply across all of the city. So with that, I will just note that a key part of each of the scenarios is are non-physical solutions. These are solutions that help us better able to adapt to flood risk and through policies and programs, as I mentioned, education and outreach, new services, and emergency management. We'd like to take a closer look at each of these and the different types of options that exist within them. I'll highlight a couple as part of the discussion for scenario one, but just in the interest of time, we'll highlight some of these others as we walk through each of the scenarios. One of the pieces that I think we'd really like to highlight as part of this is the idea of a city-led floodplain management 101 campaign. This would be really extending some of the information that we're sharing here today, led by the city of Newark, really outreach into the community through its channels to promote awareness and knowledge about what it means to live in a floodplain and what it means to be at increasing risk of flooding over time. Another item to highlight here in the second category in the sort of orange area is the notion of developing tools to address the issue of trash building up in streets and clogging catch basins. This makes it hard for, as I mentioned, water to enter the drainage system. And so some solutions that could address this would be to adopt a catch basin program, which provides a kit and guidance to residents to help clean up trash and address the problem of catch basins becoming clogged. And apologies, that was in the purple category there. I'd also like to quickly touch on the concept of a stormwater utility. This is kind of a new concept in New Jersey, but something that's been implemented in other states around the country. And it's a way for the utility to collect fees from properties based on the amount of impervious surface that they have. And it enables cities to really develop a source of money to help mitigate the impacts of flooding that is tied to kind of the contribution of a particular development or a particular property to that problem. So it becomes more of a ongoing source of funding that can really have significant benefits in terms of implementing some of the strategies that Tyler just talked about. So we'll talk about some of these other strategies as we move through here as part of scenarios 2 and 3. But I think we've probably talked enough at this point. So we'd love to pause here Simeon, Melissa, and hear from you if there's anything that we've talked about that you think really resonates and would be beneficial, and or other ideas that we didn't talk about, and some prompts to think about are particular streets or properties that you would want to see transformed, or the types of projects that really do appeal to you in terms of either structural or non-structural approaches.
I guess I'll come off of mute first. Good evening, everybody. I mean, I really, without my ward really being represented, you know what I'm saying? I'm kind of hesitant about sharing my opinion, but if my ward was represented, I'm pretty much for the infrastructure repairs as far as, what you suggested as far as the waterways and the sewers and everything. But that South Ward, that Upper Clinton Hill, that area need to be represented. That airport section that is on that map, that's just down there by the Weekway Park. I think we anchor our locations by our park, and we didn't see West Side Park, nor did we see, like that entrance over by 78. So, but with the solutions that y'all offering, it seems on board. The only thing I didn't hear was the assistance for the assistance after the storm happened. This is a lot of prevention. I was on a meeting with Samuel Vianenti today with the DCA, and we was talking about that FEMA zoning. So how's the zone? Because on that meeting, FEMA kind of zoned us, and according to the zoning, that's when it's time to get assistance for, like, when you get storm damage from the flooding. Like, this is good, and this is kind of looking forward. But like right now with it raining today, there's some people who might have to go through some flooding. So that part of the plan I really didn't see as far as like the assistance, the transparency also. I know it's like a $228 million grant on the table that they trying to help us with, but we need some transparency, and we need more so about the assistance, and not just having to give all the information, map our whole neighborhood out, and then when we go to FEMA, we not even represented.
So what I was hearing was, a need for resources for recovery right after a flood, kind of attention to proactive planning for the long term, but also, not ignoring the need that folks have for assistance now and in the future. I think the second thing I heard was about resources. So, that folks need help and resources to plan for the future and be ready for this kind of flood risk.
Yes, that's about right. That's about right. And what's your name again?
Oh, my name is Trevor.
Okay, that's about right, Trevor. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. And one of the things we'll talk about on one of the next slides is the idea of resilience hubs. I'll be curious, we'll talk about it in a minute. I'll be curious your thoughts on that as a potential solution. It's something we've heard from other residents of the city would be helpful. Melissa, did you have any thoughts that you wanted to share? It's okay if not, and we can move on, but just want to give you a chance.
Robert, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, I'm sorry. I always have to unplug the projector from my laptop so that you all can hear me. Currently, I do not have questions. I'm not sure we're going to be on the 7 o'clock call because I may join again because I am missing certain information. I'm kind of like trying to multitask. I am listening, and I just want to thank you for providing this map to us and the information and resources to improve the city of Newark, whether that's in the West Ward, the South Ward, the East Ward, whatever ward it's in. This is great for us. And I'll probably join the call again to add more to it because I have some plans that I've written out myself that I don't have right now with me. I'm still in the office at work, and that I would like to just add here to this conversation.
Terrific. Yeah. Well, you'll see Tyler and I again. So, so yeah, I'll look forward to seeing you then. I certainly understand multitasking. So, thank you for listening in.
Alrighty, thank you.
All right, Tyler, can I turn it back over to you and go into the next scenario?
Yeah, let's touch base here on scenario 2 now. So same format as the previous scenario. Let's look at the physical solutions here first. The drainage improvements again. Now these are similar to what we saw on scenario 1, right? There's stormwater retention park and then a stormwater median that's being used to help convey water away. So same two concepts, retention and conveyance. But in this case, you can see we used pictures that imply the scale of these is a little bit larger. In scenario 2, now we're creating partnerships, public, private, community, academia, right? And so the scale of the water that we can manage through these types of systems is larger now that we're pulling in more area and more people to collaborate. Moving to the green infrastructure physical solutions for scenario 2. Now with these partnerships, we don't necessarily, we have more opportunities to go beyond the right-of-way and the public properties that we did in scenario 1. So now for green infrastructure, we are looking at things about green infrastructure on private properties. So similar concept to the stormwater parks, but now on private properties, as well as blue and green roofs. Again, similar concept, trying to retain water where it falls and keep it out of the flood risk areas. Okay, now moving over to the plan views. These are going to look really similar to what we saw in scenario 1, except we're going to see more opportunities, right? So we're looking at all of the retention areas that we saw last time, and then there's another opportunity here that we've identified through the public-private partnership. You can see the number of roads that are now in the light green, where we are going to try, we can try to do green corridors, has increased. There was only 2 or 3 in the first scenario. Now there's more, so much more water being retained here. And then we do have identified a potential opportunity for that resilience hub that Trevor had mentioned as a community resource to go to after a flooding event for informations or as a place to gather. I think the Resilience Hub, Trevor is probably going to walk through a couple of the other things that we envision for these spaces. So now moving on to the Roseville area. I am behind on my slides. So similar approach here. We're again increasing the amount of green corridors in this space. And you also see here, there's a lot more light blue lines. So they're the plan here is to try to develop more stormwater sewers to collect water from the west side of the Branch Brook Park and the Branch Brook Lake area. And again, bring that into those public spaces and convey it away, and ultimately tie that in to a new interceptor that will be located along the Passaic River. So again, just increasing the scale in which we can do things now that we have these partnerships, and again, integrating these potential resilience hub locations to serve as information centers, gathering places after a flood or other hazards have occurred for safety and for information.
So on the non-structural side, again, as Tyler mentioned, this scenario is all about kind of thinking a little bit bigger in terms of scale. So the kinds of non-structural solutions or approaches that can be implemented through partnerships between organizations, between municipalities, between organizations and municipalities. So really just an approach that would require partnerships. So one of the things to touch on here, as I mentioned before, is a flood management 101 campaign that is something that came directly out of feedback we've gotten earlier about the importance of building education, awareness, and resources related to flooding so that people understand and have the sort of ability to enter into a more of a informed discussion and are prepared to take action to build resilience and recover from a flood event. This could look like a lot of different things. It could include a handbook, handouts, social media campaigns, websites, videos, public art, all kinds of different approaches that can be used to raise awareness and knowledge regarding flood risk and resilience in Newark. There's also opportunities on the policy and governance side for incentivizing green infrastructure on private property. This is something that Tyler touched on, but is potential an opportunity that has significant potential to leverage private investment into implementing some of the strategies that Tyler has talked about, but would require pretty significant coordination and collaboration between the city and private developers and entities that are responsible for building that kind of infrastructure. And then finally, on the Resilience Hub, which is in is part of the non-structural solutions in the third category here of service and program development. This is an idea that could be administered really at any of the three scales. So you could have smaller scale resilience hubs or a smaller scale resilience hub led at municipal facilities. At this scale, we have an even broader opportunity to partner with nonprofits for a partnership between nonprofits and the city to manage multiple resilience hubs that offer climate-related programming, can be part of that floodplain management 101 campaign. And also, I think, Simi, to your point earlier, be a resource for the recovery of residents after a flood event takes place. So a place where there could be charging stations, where there could be shelter for those who need it, food, and even, for example, when we think about other hazards that are not flooding, extreme heat or excessive heat, which is something that we're going to be seeing as a result of climate change with even more frequency, that these can serve as cooling centers as well. So really interesting and innovative idea that's come out of this process and has really been something that's been raised by the community. I will then pause there and we'll take any questions or feedback, Simi or Melissa. It's okay, I think you've shared some of your ideas, so we don't have to stay here for long, but I will pause in case you have additional thoughts to add at this point.
I'm thinking that I think we didn't cover options for people who have been affected by floods. I think New Jersey is offering, New Jersey is surveying and offering either to raise your house, or either a buyout program. I think that's what program is that? Blue Acres or something like that.
Blue Acres, yeah.
Yeah, Blue Acres, the buyout program. So how can that adapt to these neighborhoods as far as like Newark? And also just trying to come up with some type of sustainable irrigation, because what I'm looking at with these maps and a lot of those other ones, in the conversation that I've been having, people were surrounded by like brooks or rivers. So the overflow from them little brooks or rivers kind of get into the neighborhood. What we dealing with in the South is kind of different because we not neighbored by a lake, a river, or a brook. So that type of irrigation where you would just put like that water, a larger waterway, it kind of, it kind of don't work for us. But you did address as far as like, creating better green space to absorb some of the water. So maybe that's us, like looking at the area and saying what's private or saying what city and what would be best, redesign for like, natural irrigation, green space type stuff. But other than that, I think y'all, covered the most, but and information dispensing too, because people in all these wards, no matter South, all the North, we have a problem with getting information dispensed after the emergency. I think we still doing, this is like the leftover COVID time. So a lot of information kind of got shut down. So we kind of rely on social media a lot. So we need information, as far as with the recovery.
Are there specific ways that people get information that you think are being missed now, or opportunities to better share information?
In Newark, we got to cater to the homeowner. And the homeowners in Newark is the elderly. That's who the homeowners is. And when you cater to the elderly, it's technology. I think the elderly still get their information the old-fashioned, which is through the mail. So we have these grabs or anything, and the mayor he does a deli thing, but that's if they know how to work Facebook. So they still get it through the mail, and the newspaper ain't the newspaper it's not what the newspaper used to be. Used to get through the Star Ledger. Nobody don't read the newspaper no more. So when you talk about the homeowners and the people who really affected by like flood damage, it's like how quick can they get the information? For instance, in Newark, I think on one of these other calls, you got the Ironbound. So the Ironbound has an association that addresses that. Up here, we have to go to Don La Casa or something like that. And they or PSC&G, but it's like you have to fumble around and go through too much just to get a little bit of assistance. And by that, it's like, it's too much. It's too much.
Yeah, no, I hear that. And that's really helpful to hear, though. Appreciate that. I also like the idea. I mean, you mentioned Blue Acres and elevating homes. One thing that's not on here is, how do homeowners prepare their homes for risk? I mean, there's a lot that can be done in, parks and roadways to increase drainage or help drainage, but that won't necessarily address all of the risks. So there is some actions that your homeowners might need to take, or property owners. Let's move forward.
I'm still on. I was just waiting for Simi to finish. And Simi, I was actually looking for your number. So if you could just send it to direct message it to me, that'll be fine. I want to know, because this is like a big issue in Newark, and it's also relative to the flooding and why certain areas flood much worse than others. Like, we have like really, the infrastructure of the streets are poor. Like, and I'm talking about the potholes. It's ridiculous. And not only does it affect areas that flood like really badly, it affects people who are driving on these roads, right? Like, we're investing so much money on getting our tires fixed, and none of it's money to be allocated towards that issue, like the potholes and just the infrastructure of the streets. Like, I just think that's important as well.
Okay, so yeah, like thinking about the as part of a design of a new street that includes a green network or a bioswale, some of the infrastructure that Tyler was mentioning, opportunities to improve that street too, so it doesn't have as many potholes, so it maybe has better pedestrian crossings so people are safer when they cross the street, things like that. Yeah, I think that's it. There's a lot of the when we think broadly about resilience, a lot of the kinds of approaches here have multiple kinds of benefits, not just helping with flooding, but also the potential to improve park space or improve multimodal or multi-use transportation.
Right.
Great, and I see somebody else joined, so welcome. We are going to be closing soon, so we're going to move on to the final scenario. We have about 5 minutes. Oh, she left. We have about 5 minutes left, yeah, we will be these slides will be available for folks who want to look more closely at it. This session is being recorded, so you can go back and watch it. And it sounds like, Melissa, we may see you again later on. So
yes, hopefully I'm gonna drive home and try to get some things together and engage more, because all this information that you're providing us is very important. And I think that this should be also implemented in the schools, like in public schools. Like our students should know about the environment and what's, how they're affected by it. Sorry. And so I wish I had learned much of what you're presenting now earlier on, because then I could have, pursued, and not that it's too late, but a educational path in like civil or urban engineering, where I can kind of contribute more to the conversation. And I do try to teach myself these things on my own time, but it's more helpful when you have people who know the information themselves and that can kind of simplify the information to you.
Yeah, well, we're certainly happy to have you here and eager to help bridge some of that knowledge gap as much as we can through this process. Tyler, do you want to, we have about 3 minutes left, so maybe the highlights here on scenario 3.
Yeah, let's go through these quickly. So recall in this scenario that now we've got regional coordination. So not just local entities that are coordinating with one another, but now across geography and potentially across municipalities. And so again, you'll see that the scale increases a size further here, where for drainage improvements, you're looking at these really large, deeper tunnels or larger conveyance and storage systems, as well as some of these inland detention ponds that go above the capacities of some of the retention facilities on parks. And then to touch on the green infrastructure side, on the next slide here, we have 2 strategies now. The regional urban greenways, now instead of just a roadway corridor, we're expanding these. They're going across regions. I think we may have lost the slide there, but just in the interest of time, I'll speak to the second, which is the green corridors for stormwater management, which provide additional retention and conveyance opportunities in these green spaces. So looking at the plan view, and again, I'm going quickly here. I know we're close to being over, but you'll see a lot of the similar opportunities we showed in the previous scenarios. And then you'll see that we've started to more explicitly define some areas in Ivy Hill and Vailsburg where we may be able to put in some of those conveyance systems. And this regional coordination unlocks the opportunities and the ability to then convey that water across boundaries to the Elizabeth River. So additional pathways to get water out of this area before it causes damages. And then looking at the plan view for the Roseville area, I'll highlight a couple things. Similar strategy here, right? Creating those separate sewer networks that feed into Branch Brook Park and Branch Brook Lake. A couple differences maybe to highlight is this regional coordination. Now, instead of bringing that water into another sewer that's located along the Passaic, there may be an opportunity to directly create a pathway to directly discharge the water from this area into the Passaic River. And so you are creating that conveyance corridor and the green corridors in these areas to move water away more efficiently with dedicated lines that outfall to the Passaic River.
And yeah, apologies, my slides froze up for a moment, which is why there was the hiccup there. I will just highlight one part here. So this is, again, this third scenario, which is all about regional collaboration. So thinking larger than just the city of Newark, the entities and organizations that exist there, but really thinking at the larger scale about what's possible. And I think this opens up a lot of new opportunities for collaboration and implementation at that scale. What I will highlight here is the idea that comes out of this program, which is the Resilient New Jersey program. This was created to develop an action plan for the region, and as discussed in the primary presentation here at the introduction, is going to be wrapping up or slated to wrap up later this year. And what an option that exists as part of the scenario 3 is an actual continuation of that program, continuation and expansion of that program. To think about it as really the regional collaboration lead in terms of continuing the conversation around flood resilience and other types of resilience. So elements that could fall under this umbrella include expansion of the program to include sustainability and other livability measures, the regional scale distribution of the flood risk, flood management 101 campaign, really leveraging Resilient New Jersey as an opportunity to engage and collaborate across municipal boundaries and creating kind of that single source of truth or go-to source for all resources, messaging, and really all information that's related to resilience. And this is an opportunity that Newark could play a critical role in, and also work closely with neighboring cities. So something that we look forward to discussing further with you. I will stop there, and we can go to the discussion slide. We also have a final discussion slide here that has a couple additional prompts that maybe we can focus on, which is, everything here that we've discussed, is there something that you think is most important or that you absolutely want to see happen? Because a key part of developing our action plan will be prioritizing those actions. And Tyler, if you wouldn't mind dropping in the chat the survey link. There is a survey that we would love to have you all fill out after the conversation here to provide any additional questions or thoughts that come up to you after the conversation ends here. So thank you so much for sticking with it and joining us this evening. And if you have additional thoughts, please go ahead and share now.
Thank you so much for this. Again, I appreciate it. I'm going to try to get this information out of the chat so that I can refer back to this presentation. And then God's willing, I'll see you all at this. Is it 7 o'clock or were they saying 6:30?
It's going to be 6:30. We'll kick off, and the introductory presentation will be the same as it was earlier. So if you saw that, you could join around 7 if you just want to join the breakouts again.
Okay, no problem. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah. Thank you both.
And I won't be back for the 6:30, but on that 6:30 call, trying to add some one thing that we was missing was some emergency planning. Okay. Like no emergency planning as far as during the flood. So that probably could be added or added to the plan. So,
Yeah, we'll absolutely mention that, and I appreciate that that flag.
Okay, thank you. And good
Thank you
evening,
for all the
everybody.
feedback.
Thank y'all.
All right, have a good rest of your evening, and we'll talk to you soon.